All right, let's jump right in, because today we're exploring a seriously mind-bending idea about what reality actually is. We're going to ask you to set aside, just for a moment, everything you think you know about solid things and empty space, because we're about to challenge the very idea of a particle.
So let's start with this massive question. What if all the tiny building blocks of our universe, electrons, quarks, all that stuff, what if they aren't separate little things zipping around? What if they're actually just ripples, just peaks on the surface of a single universal ocean? Let's explore what that would actually mean.
Okay, so before we can really get this new idea, we have to talk about the current one. And honestly, the way physics describes the quantum world right now is, well, it's just wonderfully weird.
And here's where it gets really strange. See, in quantum mechanics, a particle isn't just one thing. It's described as being both a single, specific point and a kind of smeared-out cloud of possibilities all at the same time. I mean, how can it be both?
And believe it or not, it gets even weirder. So picture a single electron, right? Physics tells us it starts out as a point. But then, and this is the crazy part, it travels every single possible path to get from A to B, simultaneously. All those different paths then kind of interfere with each other, creating what's called a probability field. This means we can never ever know exactly where it's going to end up. All we can know is where it's most likely to be. It's not a predictable trip, it's just statistics.
So all of this strangeness, it kind of leads you to a pretty profound question. If our description of reality is this complicated and bizarre, are we absolutely sure we're looking at it the right way? Maybe the problem isn't reality, maybe it's just our perspective. And here's the big one. What if the very concept of a separate particle is just something we humans came up with? A useful label, because that's how our big, clunky brains see the world. What if, at the deepest, most fundamental level, reality isn't made of particles at all?
So, this leaves us with two different ways of looking at everything. The traditional way forces us into this weird contradiction where things are somehow both particles and waves. But this other view, it's so much simpler. It suggests reality is just one big, unified wave, and the particles we think we see are just the most intense points of that wave, kind of like the highest crest of a ripple on a pond.
And that brings us to the very heart of this new idea. A unified vision where everything, and I mean absolutely everything, is just a part of one single, waving reality.
This quote right here just nails it. It says, reality is one whole thing waving, where the waves can be seemingly separate at larger scales. At our human scale, sure, we see separate things, a chair, a tree, another person. But this idea suggests that underneath it all, it's really just one connected thing, always moving, always waving.
The concept that holds all this together is called wholeness. It's the idea that there's one fundamental fabric of reality, and everything we see and measure are just properties of that fabric. So it's not that particles exist in space. It's that particles and space are both just features of this one single whole.
Now here's the really beautiful part. This model actually explains one of the biggest mysteries in quantum physics. When scientists zoom all the way down to the smallest possible scales, the whole idea of a distinct particle just melts away into a fuzzy wave-like blur. And guess what? This model predicts that. It says, of course the particleness disappears because the particle was never a separate thing to begin with.
Okay, so this waving hole idea seems to work pretty well for the tiny quantum world. But what about the massive scale of stars and galaxies? Well, this is where it gets incredibly cool.
Think of it like this. At the most basic level, there's just one thing, this unified, waving fabric. But as you zoom out to the larger scales that we live in, our perception kind of splits this one fabric into two different things. The stage, which we call space-time, and the actors on that stage, which we call energy and matter.
And get this, that two-part view of a stage and the actors on it, that is exactly what Einstein's theory of general relativity describes. So this new perspective doesn't throw out Einstein's work at all. It actually gives it a potential foundation, an explanation for where space-time and matter might have even come from in the first place.
So let's bring this all together. What is the big takeaway here? It's not about replacing everything we know. It's about potentially adding a new, deeper, more fundamental layer to how we understand, well, everything.
We're not talking about throwing out your physics textbooks. The idea here is that there might be a deeper reality, and all the rules we've discovered, from quantum mechanics to general relativity, they all just naturally emerge from it. It's a search for the ultimate why.
So really, the most crucial point to take away is this. We're not replacing physics. we're adding a foundational perspective. This wave-centric view is a potential backstory for our most successful theories, giving them a shared origin in one single, unified, waving whole.
And that leaves us with one last big thought. If this perspective holds any water, if reality truly isn't a collection of separate bits and pieces, but is one single interconnected system, then what does that say about our place in it? Are we really just separate individuals? Or are we all just different waves on the very same cosmic ocean? Something to think about.